Well, thank you, Jesse, so much for having me here today. And I really appreciate all you guys are doing for Brave New Life Project. There's a lot of victims that are in this world, and those are people that aren't really talked about all that often. And I think we live in a much better world if people had opportunities to work in different fields and, invent their lives. So that's great. So I'm David. I'm the 40-year-old vegan on YouTube and TikTok and all these different platforms. And so I used to be a former slaughterhouse inspector. I worked in the industry for about 15 years, and now I'm about 7 and a bit years vegan and vegan for the animals. So that's sort of what I'm doing and what I'm sharing my experiences, and hopefully that will inspire others to get active or become vegan, because I think some of the things that I witnessed, if anybody else saw that, I'm almost 100% sure that they would be vegan and they'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. So.
Yeah, and that is a very interesting perspective, and that's exactly why we brought you on. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Okay. So my first question kind of piggybacks off of what you just talked about. So what got you into working at the slaughterhouse? What kind of pulled you into it?
Yeah, so I originally was, sorry, I just had a bit of a flashback there, so I do get that from time to time. But so I started out, as a young man in my 20s. That's sort of when I started as an inspector for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And so my grandfather actually started that sort of trend in my family, as well as my grandmother. So my family, much of them, immigrated and worked in these places. So my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle currently works as an inspector for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So as a young man or a young boy growing up, mostly at my grandparents' house because they had a swimming pool and they treated me awesome. And I looked up to my grandfather. So much like a lot of families, they immigrate here from all over the world, and they're given a job. And the job is probably usually not the best job. And he was given a slaughterhouse job. It's the same with my grandmother. And so it's the community they grew up with and they knew. And my grandfather saw inspectors get paid more, probably work less hard. And he decided he wanted to become one of them. So after learning English and befriending these inspectors and having them over at his house, and he found his way to become an inspector. And at that time, it was like a highly sought after job, like being a federal employee, especially for an immigrant. Not wanting to work on a kill line specifically, or like in that work to that degree. Maybe monitoring what's going on was a better idea for him. So he did that. He paved the way, and I looked up to him. He used to have the inspectors over, and I didn't really have like much ambition growing up, and I think the writing was sort of on the wall for myself. So that's sort of how it really started for me. I started off, like I said, 20 years old, working at Maple Lodge Farms in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. So they're the largest processor of chickens in Canada. And so when I started, it was about 60 birds per minute. You had 3 inspectors on a line. It was rather not slow, but like it was, I would say, probably an easier job at that time, not mentally, but physically. I guess, the experiences that I kind of went through when I first started, like I still remember the first time I walked, especially into the live receiving area, the smell, the feathers, the dust, the debris, just right in your face. I noticed, I'm just flashing back right now, so I'm just having memories back. But like even when I put my hand on a rail, there was feces on a rail, and then you'd walk down, and that's all that was there because the hoses would be cleaning off the crates, and all the debris would be falling down, feathers, eggshells, body parts sometimes, and all these different things. So it was shocking when I first started. I do remember like almost hyperventilating, but like just holding it together because my grandfather actually helped me get a job there. And so I thought, I have to like man up and not let that affect me because then, my grandfather went through all of this and I can't let him down. And, and it has to be done because there's no other way. We have to eat animals. So I might as well try to make the best of that situation. And so, it was definitely very anxious, especially when you saw some of the things that I saw. Oftentimes, I don't really talk too much about it. Like I don't get into too much detail because it might be graphic for anybody watching, or it might trigger some flashbacks for me. But I am seeking a bit of help for that. But yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that definitely sounds pretty awful. And I can see now why it would be so hard to keep the environment clean if things are falling from above. You know what I mean? That would be very difficult. And why there's so many diseases that spread throughout those environments. Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think we'll get into it a bit later, but just like the conditions, like the smell and everything would like permeate into your skin, like, and so you'd constantly have a situation where you could get sick or develop something.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. So your skin is your largest organ on your body, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of mental health, how was your mental health while you were working there? Do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would probably echo the sentiments of like a lot of people that work in these industries. So like I was saying, like I had to man up and I had to suppress what I didn't say that, but I did have to suppress my feelings just in order to get by some of the things that I witnessed. It was kind of twofold for me too as well because I'd witnessed things, for example, someone throwing a chicken, and there'd be some sort of a boundary or line that I would have to somehow judge. This man threw a chicken. The chicken scratched him. He apologized to me. He said he would never do it again. He begged me not to do anything because if I had mentioned it to his supervisor, he likely would have been fired and forced to move back to the country that he immigrated from. And so you have to make judgments, and you also do have a bit of empathy for people. And maybe that wasn't the sound judgment, like the best choice that I had to make. But when you're bombarded with some of these choices, it's hard. And so, and then another point to that is when you would bring some of these issues up to superiors, they'd often say, well, just document it and we'll send it up to the chain. And that's something we rarely ever saw was anything dealt with in that situation. Just that we have to be there more often and do our job more and write things down and whatnot. So that played a toll in itself. And then actually seeing what happens to the animals and hearing them and witnessing what they go through, so many instances. I like, for myself, I documented probably, they call them non-compliance. So things that would be broken within the confines of the law, I guess you could say, is kind of a way to word it, because I think it's all abuse now, personally. But yeah, like the things you would see, and so there's multiple things that you would see even on a daily basis that were questionable. Like why are you throwing crates from this high up? Why is there only one person throwing these crates down? You know, things like that. Why were the birds coming in why did every single bird have a bruise on them? So were they handled roughly at the farm? Obviously they were. And who's doing anything about it? Nobody. You know, I report to a vet, I report to whoever. And then the psychological aspect of that going home, you know, you smell like it, you go home, and, you know, not only are you dealing with the physical conditions of staring at a line going so fast, but you're also dealing with the lighting and the noise, and then, you know, thinking about some of those things that you'd witnessed. So yeah, overall, just pretty awful, I guess you could say. And yeah, it definitely does affect my mental health. I do see someone for that. And I would say to anybody that has, you know, issues, I think it's important to open up. I suppressed things for a very long time, and I thought that was what you were supposed to do. But I'm learning now that that's probably not the best approach.